Okay, hello class. John Marston isn't here, and this is the lecture for Friday, April 3rd. We will be wrapping up the classical period today, talking about two pieces by Mozart. The first one, Symphony number 40 in G minor. And this will be our example of sonata form. As you recall from the last lecture, we are focusing on movements that are found in a classical symphony and string quartet, right? The two new genres that we're looking at. The symphony that we're going to listen to and look at in a little bit more detail from the YouTube video we have of Mozart's symphony in G minor. I'll point out the different sections as they are featured throughout, but we did talk about them. In the classical period, what becomes standard in the orchestra, in addition to the large string section, is the woodwind section, which would be made up of the standard being at least two flutes, two oboes, two bassoons, clarinets, bassoons, a horn section that would consist of French horns and trumpets later on in the classical period, and certainly with Beethoven and beyond that will be expanded, and timpani, which would be pitched drums. So that would be filling out the orchestra, the string orchestra that already exists. And then the string quartet, as you see there on your screen, two violins, viola, and cello. But if we're listening to a symphony or a string quartet, in this period, it has four movements, and we know what they are. Individual sections or compositions, pieces, right? Songs, however you want to think of it in terms of modern terms, right? Four individual pieces that are meant to be played together, one after the next. And you could see under forms, this is the order in which they would unfold. First movement is sonata form. It is the most complex of all the movements. That's why we saved it for last. It has these three sections, the exposition, development, recapitulation, which we will get into in a moment. Second movement, theme and variation. We listened to last class. What does that mean? Well, exactly what it says. It's a theme, a main melody that's repeated over and over again with variation. So how do we vary it? We manipulate, change the elements of music, put it in different instruments, in different keys or modes, right? Like the Haydn piece. If the main theme is in major, maybe later it comes in minor. If it's homophonic, as we know, the main texture of this period is homophonic. You might have some sections that are in polyphony, etc. You vary the elements. Minuet and trio, we listen to a piece by Mozart, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, a little night music, which is two contrasting dances in triple meter. The minuet, and then the trio is another minuet by a different name that would be contrasting in character. We talked about in the Mozart, the minuet being more staccato in rhythm, and the trio being more legato, right, more connected. And then the minuet returns. And finally, we listen to a rondo in the Beethoven string quartet. Rondo is similar to ritornello form that we heard in the Baroque period, in the concerto, which is space repetition, a main theme that keeps coming back, okay? So there's an overview of the different forms. Now let's get into the Mozart piece. and what we were talking about, or what I mentioned that we will be talking about. So again, just a quick recap on Mozart. His date 1756 to 1791. He's our third of the three classical composers, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven. Mozart, above any other, is considered to be an extraordinary child prodigy, because he has these extraordinary musical talents at a extremely young age, the age of 4, 5, 6. He's writing sophisticated pieces, and does not do as success. He's not as successful as securing a job and making a living. We talked a little bit about that the last time. So let's just go right to the music and talk about sonata form. Okay, here we go. All right, this is the listening chart for the piece we are about to hear. Composed in 1788, Symphony number 40 in G minor, K550. We already talked about the title of instrumental pieces. It's a symphony. It's his 40th. He wrote quite a few symphonies, didn't he? Right? 41 that we know of for sure. K550. Kirkel is the musicologist, music historian that cataloged Mozart's music in the early 20th century, trying to put it into some form of chronological order. And we're focusing on the first movement, which is the most complex in a symphony. And these are the components which we're going to try to hear. All right, so the three main components: the exposition, development, recapitulation. Okay, very broadly, the exposition is where the main themes are introduced, and we usually have two. Okay, so think of the word expose. The main ideas are exposed, presented here in the exposition. Then in the development, they are, as the word says, developed. Okay, broken down, manipulated, varied. Okay, like in a theme and variation, but not as methodical, in a more random, you might say, or less predictable way, deliberately, to make it all the more exciting and unstable. So the development would be the most unstable part of the music. Recapitulation, what does that word mean? To recap, bring it back. So the ideas from the exposition are brought back, put back together. And then we have a coda, something to tie everything, bring it to a conclusion. Okay, so more specifically, let me go through and I guess relabel some of these terms here. So, and then I'll point these out as we listen, and then certainly you listen to this piece on your own without my commentary on top. The exposition, we have the first theme, which he's calling here the sighing theme. So the first main melody is introduced. Then we have a transitional theme, which is often called a bridge, right? Something to bridge you to the next section. In that place, modulation frequently occurs. What does that mean? To modulate, to move from one key or one scale to another. Then, what's labeled there is number 3, the calm theme, traditionally would be called the second theme. So, for example, the first theme might be minor and aggressive sounding. Then the transitional theme, which is the bridge, modulates us into a new key and a different theme, which is different in characteristic. In this case, is major, in a major key, and more gentle. Then number 4, very similar to the opening theme. We're going to call that the closing theme, we'll hear the main motive, which is what he's calling the sighing theme. This 3-note motive, I'll point it out when we hear it at the beginning. That's what he really sort of manipulates throughout this composition. Okay, there's your exposition. And then what's it say? Exposition repeats. We hear it a second time. We hear all that twice. Then we go on to the development. Opening theme fragmented and harmonically unstable. So here we're really starting to fragment that opening theme, theme 1 in this case, take it in and out of different keys. The music becomes more polyphonic here, less stable, less predictable. And then recapitulation. Everything is brought back slightly different. We have the main theme, then the bridge, which is labeled as number 2, transitional theme. In this case, we do not modulate. And when we get to the second theme, which is labeled number 3 there, it is now in the original key, so it doesn't modulate. In the exposition, we went from first theme in G minor, second theme, we modulate to E flat major. Here, first theme G minor, second theme after the bridge, still G minor, and the closing theme, G minor, and then the coda, something to bring it to an end. Okay, so that's what we're listening to in music. I like to look at this and think of it as, music tells a story, right? We love listening to music. Certainly when there are lyrics, when there's a text, it's obvious that it's telling a story, right? In a very gripping, emotional way, expressive way. But what if it's instrumental music? Well, it's also telling a story. So think about a novel, a movie. If you were to break it down into its simple components, what happens, okay? As soon as it starts, there's a main theme, a main idea. Let's say it's a love story, right? 2 people fall in love. What might commonly happen? There's a misunderstanding. They fall out of love. Tension. We don't know what's going to happen. That's the development. And again, if it's a conventional story and it's a feel-good movie, and we want to make it happy, we know what's going to happen. The misunderstanding will be resolved. Everything's brought back together. Recapitulation. What if it's a murder mystery? Same thing. That's the main theme. Somebody's murdered. Who did it? Tension. We don't know. We go on different paths. Recapitulation. We bring it together. Solve the crime. Okay? Sonata form, that's what's happening here. It's a story being told, and we're following the music as it is elaborated, developed, okay? So let's keep that in mind. All right, here we go. Let's have a listen. Here it is, Mozart Symphony number 40 in G minor, first movement. That's what we're listening to today. Okay, there's a copy of the printed score. I'll make some comments along the way. Here we go. Theme 1. The sighing theme, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Okay, that 3-note motive at the beginning, da-da-da, is what's going to be developed. This is all, there's your flute, wind section, you see that? Clarinet sitting behind the flute. Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. 3-note sighing motive. Now we're starting to transition here. big dynamic change marks the bridge. This is the transition. Bridge modulating. We'll get a clear cadence here. Bring it to a resolution, which right here, cadence. Second theme, hear that? More calm. Different rhythmic feel, more legato. Featuring the wind instruments, there they are. Flute, oboe, there's the bassoon in the back. This is still the end of the second theme. Here we go into the closing theme. And we hear that motive. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Right? That little motive from the first theme. Okay, hope that's making sense. This is the closing theme. And then we got a lot of repetition to bring it to a conclusion. Everything repeats. Back to the beginning, right? Literally, they're playing the exact same music. This is theme 1. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Hopefully you're getting more used to that theme because that's what will be developed. Flute. String section. Here we go. Transitional. Bridge right there. Modulating to a new key. And when we cadence, there will be a little pause in the music right here. Theme 2, E flat major. There's your string section. Your wind section being featured there, so they show the winds. This is the second theme. Closing theme, right? Okay, end of the exposition coming up. This time we do not repeat. We go on to the development right here. First theme. Sounds like the exposition, but we only get the first phrase. Now watch. Sequence. Da-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da. Sequence, new key, we're modulating unexpectedly. There it is again in the lower voices with the counter melody up on top. Now it flips. The theme is up top with the counter melody underneath. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da, right? We're fragmenting that theme and we're taking it through different keys. Fragmenting it even more. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum, down to those 3 notes. Pianissimo getting very soft. Still in the development. Really taking it down to its smallest element. Da-da-da, those 3 notes, that's it. The sighing theme, the motive. And there's nowhere else to go with it except recapitulation right here. Recapitulation, okay? This is the exposition coming back, but slightly altered. We get the first theme in its entirety. Here comes the bridge. Slightly different this time. The end of the first theme, slightly different. Into the bridge, which is slightly different. It's actually a little bit more elaborate. And it does move in and out of keys a little bit, but it's going to wind up in the same key. So, the point being that in the end, it does not modulate. We stay in the home key. So to make it even more stable than the exposition, everything in the tonic key, the main key. Remember that word, tonic. Second theme in minor this time, not major, right? End of the second theme, even a little different than before, but we're staying all in the same key. Closing theme. All right, closing theme. Still in G minor though. Okay, coda right here. Something to really bring the whole movement to a conclusion. And we hear fragments of the same theme as we have all along. That's the end of the first movement. So remember, that's all we are listening to. But the second movement would be andante, meaning slow, and it is in theme and variation form, as we know, right? Second movement of a symphony or a string quartet. Then the third movement, minuet and trio, and the last movement, rondo, okay? That's all we have of that one for right now. So let's move on to the one other piece. But before we hear it, let's go over to, let's go over to this first. So this is your study guide, which after this piece we will review for the exam, which is on Monday, April 6th. Just like the last time, I'll email it to you at the hour, a couple minutes before. And you have 50 minutes to complete it. And the format will be similar. So let's talk about this piece first, and then we'll get to that. So these are the forms in the classical period. Symphony, we just listened to. We talked about the movements. String quartet. The movements, same thing applies. The only difference between a symphony and string quartet would be the instrumentation. 2 violins, viola, cello. A solo concerto. So we know what a concerto is. Solo concerto means you have one soloist that is featured. And it, just like in the Baroque period, it's still 3 movements like the Baroque period. But the first movement is in sonata form rather than ritornello. So that's what we're about to hear. And because it's a concerto in sonata form, it's treated slightly different. So let's look at a listening chart for this. Here we go. Okay, so remember what we just listened to and how we talked about it. The exposition. Okay, here they're breaking it down a little bit simpler. Okay, so look up there where it says tutti. We know that means everything. Everybody plays, full orchestra. So 1, lyrical beginning. That's our first theme. 2, that's our transitional or bridge. And then 3, more lyrical. That's when we modulate to the second theme. Okay, they're not labeling anything here as a closing theme. But we have the main sections there of the exposition. Theme 1, bridge, which takes us to theme 2, different in character, different in key. Then what happened in the last exposition, right? It all repeats in a symphony. Not so in a concerto. Whoops. What happens here in a concerto? Rather than repeating, we hear the same themes, but it's reorchestrated. Now we feature, what do you think we feature? The solo instrument, right? This is a concerto. So now that soloist, this is a piano concerto, not going to play in the first section at all, but it'll be featured here. Development, we manipulate and expand on those themes just like we did in the symphony, but this will be more of a dialogue with the soloist and the orchestra. Then the recapitulation, we bring everything back in some form. Okay? It's going to be varied because we're going to have the orchestra and the soloist playing together. But it's still exposition, development, recapitulation, bring it all back together. But what's a little different? Remember that term, cadenza. Improvisation on themes heard earlier in the movement. Okay, so here it's being labeled as an improvisation, which is frequently written out. And then coda, orchestra alone, 3 fragment, orchestra alone. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let's see. Well, of course, I want you to listen to this whole thing, but I may or may not play the whole thing right now. But let's at least play through the exposition and then the repeat of the exposition, which will be, in this case, the soloist. And then we'll get into the development, and I'll probably stop it there. But then listen for the recapitulation and certainly the cadenza. Okay, and we know what a cadenza is from the Bach-Brandenburg Concerto, which we did listen to in its entirety. Now, this is a piano concerto. It says piano concerto. That's what it is. But keep in mind that in this period, the instrument is the forte piano. And oftentimes, this will be performed on the forte piano, but in this case, it isn't. It's being performed on a traditional contemporary piano. So, here we go. Here comes our soloist to the front of the stage. Shakes hands with the first violin, also known as the concert master, just, part of the tradition there. The conductor comes out, right? He's going to conduct the orchestra. Notice the soloist sits in front of the conductor. Still needs to see him, but hopefully he knows the piece, right? Notice he's not even using any music. He's playing from memory. Everyone else is using music. Okay, theme 1. Just the orchestra. All right, dynamics change. That's the bridge. Similar to what happened in the last piece. It gets a little bit more energetic. Bridge, transitional section. We're modulating. So clear ideas in the classical period. Homophonic, clear cadence. Second theme, right? Just like the last piece, just different melodies, but it almost functions identical. Okay. I would call this the closing theme, even though the chart didn't say that. This is the closing theme of the exposition. Bringing the exposition to a completion, and then the exposition is repeated, right? In a symphony, it would be an exact repeat. Here, it's a variation repeat, because here comes the soloist, exposition. There, hear that? He's playing the main theme by himself. Hear the orchestra just coming in very lightly to support the soloist. Now the orchestra is taking the main theme, and the piano is playing some ornate stuff behind it. Bridge, yeah? I think you're starting to hear that. Still the bridge. Orchestra pulls back to let that soloist shine. Cadence. Second theme, you hear that? Da 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 da. Right, we heard that. The first part of the exposition that was just played by the orchestra. Right? Closing theme. Bringing the exposition to a conclusion. Yeah. Development. Soloists and orchestra will have little dialogue in here. Right? We heard the orchestra play, now we'll have the piano play for a little bit. Okay. And here in the concerto, we sometimes have more themes that weren't even heard in the exposition introduced. Unlike in the symphony, it's just material being developed. Here, we get a little of that, and then we just get some new ideas thrown in that helps to feature the soloist. Okay, so in the development section, I'm going to stop it here, but of course, listen to the rest of it on your own, and listen for that cadenza. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have for you. Now, we are going to review for the exam, which is Monday, April 6th. Like the first exam, like it's listed on the syllabus, it will be 65 points. This study guide, which is posted under course content along with this video, And also, I always give you the YouTube link to the video. I'm finding that sometimes I was going to stop posting it on YouTube, but I find that the link just works better. Sometimes when you're on Blackboard, at least on my end, it might freeze up when you try playing it back, or you have to wait a while for it to, boot in. So if that's happening, just go to the YouTube, watch it there. But make sure you have this study guide. Everything you need to know is on these 3 pages. Okay? This exam will be worth 65 points, like the last one. Section A will be 11 questions, true and false questions. Now, since doing listening identification doesn't work under these circumstances, right? I could do that if we were meeting in class. I'm asking true and false questions about the 10 compositions that we listen to, right? And here they are. So I just give you a little synopsis of each piece, all right? Few things to keep in mind. Where did we begin a study of Baroque music? Dido and Aeneas, When I'm Laid in Earth, uses the ground bass throughout the entire aria, based on one chapter from the Aeneid written by Virgil during the Roman Empire, okay? Few things to know about the piece. That will help you with the section A, the first 11 questions, true and false. Okay, section B, a big part of this portion of the course was listening to, the only portion, right? It was all about listening to the Baroque period and the classical period. That's what we covered in a nutshell. And in a nutshell, what is the most clear way to distinguish between the Baroque style and the classical style? Well, there it is right in front of you on the screen and in your study guide. Baroque music and classical, how do they differ in texture? Baroque polyphonic, polyphony, classical homophony, melody, Baroque chromatic, classical diatonic. Dynamics, how they differ. Keyboard, right? The harpsichord is featured. Keyboard instrument. The strings are plucked in the frame, even though you still play keys. And the forte piano, you hit the keys, but the strings, which are slightly thicker and will be even thicker in the next period, they're hammered, so we get a little bit of a different tone, the forte piano. The different forms, there they are. Right, so know these things about Baroque and classical. This section will give you a statement about style, and there will be a blank where you have to fill in the word classical or Baroque, right? This period uses varying dynamics such as crescendo and decrescendo. What's the answer? Obviously would be classical, okay? That's the second section. And then the third section will be short answer questions about all of this, right? So, I could go through some of this, but it's all here for you. So what do you want to know about the Baroque period? There's the period. Remember the genres we covered. We looked at specifically a concerto and the 2 different kinds, right? The solo and the concerto grosso. We listened to 2 pieces that represented the concerto. Vivaldi, which was a solo concerto, and Bach, which was a concerto grosso. First movement always in ritornello form. We listened to opera. Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, to be more specific, is the opera we listened to. And we talked about the components of the opera, the recitative, the aria, the chorus, their functions, as well as how they differ musically, written out for you right there. So know those things. That's what you'll get on the third section. And then, of course, the example that we listened to, Henry Purcell, Dido and Aeneas, ground bass. We listened to an oratorio. Musically speaking, just like an opera, arias, recitatives, and choruses. What's the big difference? The subject matter is religious, and it's not acted out. The story is sung and spoken to you through arias and recitatives and choruses, but it's not acted. Okay, and of course, our example, George Frederick Handel, Messiah, the most famous oratorio of all times. Forms of this period: ritornello form, space repetition, fugue. The subject is the main theme in a fugue, and the counter subject is the secondary melody. Highly polyphonic, strict imitative polyphony is what it is. Ground bass, that was the other form that was used in Purcell's Dido and Aeneas. These are the terms: basso continuo, monody, harpsichord, cadenza, right? And then classical period, what we've been doing the last two lectures, right? 3 genres, 2 of them brand new, the symphony and string quartet. Those 2 genres always have these 4 forms, right? So know what these forms are, right? Know how to define them. And then the sonata form, at the very least, remember exposition is the first section where the main ideas are introduced. Development, second section where those ideas are literally developed, fragmented, tension is created. And the third section, recapitulation. The ideas are put back together, slightly different, but the same material from the exposition. And then terms, coda, tell section of music at the end of any movement provides conclusion. And the forte piano. Some additional facts about our composers, right? We gave a broad overview. Certainly there are more significant things to say, but these are often the big things that people remember. Haydn being considered by many to be the inventor of the string quartet. That's a pretty bold statement to make. We can't say that for certain, but let's just say he was the first important composer to be writing for this new ensemble. And because of Haydn, others, such as Mozart and Beethoven, wrote string quartets. Mozart considered the most amazing child prodigy, and then Beethoven, we can't help but recognize that he did go deaf and still carried on to write incredible music. There it is. I think that's all I have to say. But again, as always, contact me with any questions. Again, let me stress, be at your computers, a little before the hour or on the hour at the latest. 12 o'clock on Monday for section 1, 1 o'clock for section 2. You have 50 minutes. And the format will be as I just described. So I'll be looking for your exams and see you the next class, which will be Wednesday, April 8th, before our spring break, or our Easter break, that is. So, as always, stay healthy and safe, and talk to you soon.